The 21st century opened, global humanity was divided into two unequal parts. Less than one-sixth reside in the rich countries of Western Europe and North America, and in Japan, with high means income and material welfare, and the rest lived in the predominantly poor countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America, with low average income, low average levels of welfare, and large pools of poverty. It is generally agreed that the division of countries into rich and poor originated with the colonialism and imperialism that began more than 5 centuries ago. Although, of course, social and economic development has taken place during the whole of human history, the modern concept of development, the idea that it was possible and desirable to initiate action that would speed up the process in one part of the world, is something that dates from the period after the Second World War. Three massive changes produced and defined the moment of development as this period of crisis came to an end. First, U.S. emerged as the most powerful capitalist nation in the world by far. The second, change made development endeavors urgent. The Soviet Union formed after a communist revolution against Russian absolutism in the midst of the First World War, had experienced remarkably successful industrialization based on state planning and direction while the capitalist world languished in depression in the 1930s. Third, after the First World War, many national liberation movements as well as the Bolshevik in the USSR had demanded decolonization. Only after the Second World War, however, did the U.S. consistently support decolonization, thanks to its desire to lessen the power of its capitalist rivals and its need to compete against the Soviet bloc for the support of national liberation movements. When Truman introduced the concept of development and how some countries are under the umbrella of development while others are not, at that very moment, underdevelopment became something to yearn for. For 2/3 of the people on Earth, this positive meaning of the word development, profoundly rooted after 2 centuries of its social construction, is a reminder of what they are not, is a reminder of an undesirable, undignified condition. To escape from it, they need to be enslaved to others' experiences and dreams. The qualifications and the eligibility to become part of the development club were biased and focused on Western thought. So these countries, under the umbrella of underdevelopment, were constantly reminded of what they are not and given a roadmap to development with only one path that many countries could not conform to. Thus, the catch-up of former colonies to the level of prosperity of rich countries was placed on the world agenda. While development meant many things, rising levels of education, political participation and democracy, urbanization, technology, health and welfare, higher incomes and greater material welfare were crucial, and industrialization and state direction were seen as essential to achieving them. At first, the emphasis tended to be in grandiose projects such as the building of dams. It was assumed that if one put in money and resources, they would trickle down through the layers of society and eventually benefit everyone. It would be like starting an engine with a starting handle. Once the initial impetus was given through external aid, the whole thing would take off and become self-perpetuating. So where did development go wrong? By the 1960s, it was becoming clear that something was going wrong. The anticipated transformation was not occurring. Much of the money that was being allocated had been allotted off into private bank accounts. A number of third world dictators had made themselves into multimillionaires. Stories were common of complicated pieces of equipment which lay rusting because there was neither the expertise nor the spare parts to maintain them. Therefore, in the 1960s and 1970s, those planning development projects began to think in terms of smaller projects that would be of more direct benefit to the poor, while some voluntary aid organizations decided that the future lay not with development planned by governments, as in from top down, but through working with individual communities to help them develop and make better use of the resources that are available to them. But these approaches, while undoubtedly an improvement on the past, still have not succeeded in making any overall improvements in the situation of the world's poor. By the 1980s, the developing nations themselves were beginning to become much more vocal about what they wanted. It was at this time post-development was created. Unlike structuralist approach, which focuses on the new international economic order, which emphasizes on macroeconomic change, alternative development emphasizes agency, which focuses on people's capacity to affect change. In an effort to move beyond the hegemonic framework, most post-development scholars promote the framework of alternatives to development in economic, cultural, and political practices. These movements tend to engage in participatory forms of politics, value local ways of knowing and solutions, seek autonomy from the state and international development institutions, and promote pluralistic ways of thinking in terms of economic and political practices. Essentially, alternatives to development look at solutions to the problem in a local neighborhood from ground up, hence grassroots movements. Pioneering social movements are groping for their liberation from the global projects being imposed upon them. Grassroots movements are reinventing and creating new intellectual and institutional frameworks, leaving behind power disputes and liberating themselves from dominant ideologies. Some of these grassroots movements participate in the process of creating change through the uprising and insurrections. Other grassroots movements participate in the process of creating change through different grassroots initiatives. It would be rather impossible and naive to describe each element in the history of development and its conclusive outcome. The concepts that have been mentioned are rather starting points for individuals to constantly be critical about their surroundings and what they see on TV, hear on the radio, or see on the media. One thing that can be written with certainty is that different organizations will continuously try to implement some aspect of those concepts into practice. Whether their impact is positive or negative, it will unceasingly be questioned. One conclusion that can be affirmative is that in order for progress to occur, it is essential for the process to start with the people of that region.